Welcome to Party Today we are going to discuss about the position of women in medieval Europe. Although historical sources about medieval women are not as numerous as those relating to men, they are much richer than is often supposed. Through surviving documents, literary and other texts and images, it is clear that medieval women were resilient, resourceful, and skilled. Moreover, in exceptional instances, they were capable of exercising political power, learning, and creativity outside the domestic sphere. It is, however, dangerous to generalize about the status and experience of medieval women whose lives were shaped by as many different considerations as they are today. Interpretations of women's place in medieval society have to strike to balance between exceptional individuals who, by dint of their wealth, status, and achievements, are often relatively well documented, and the experience of ordinary women whose lives tended to leave few traces on the historical records. Most people in the medieval Europe lived in small rural communities, making their living from the land. Peasant women had many domestic responsibilities, including caring for children, preparing food, and tending livestock. During the busiest times of the year, such as the harvest, women often joined their husbands in the field to bring in the crops. Women often participated in vital cottage industries such as brewing, baking, and manufacturing textiles. The most common symbol of the peasant woman was the distaff, a tool used for spinning flax and wool. Eve is often shown with a distaff, illustrating her duty to perform manual labor after the fall from paradise. An image often seen in medieval art is a woman waving a distaff at a fox with a goose in its jaws. Sometimes in satirical images, women are even shown attacking their husbands with a distaff or some other domestic implement. Women living in towns had similar responsibilities to those in the countryside. Just as rural women helped with their husbands' work, urban women assisted their fathers and husbands in a wide variety of trades and crafts, including the production of textiles, leather goods, and metalwork, as well as running shops and inns. According to the Bible, Eve was created from Adam's rib, and having eaten the forbidden fruit, was responsible for man's expulsion from paradise. In medieval art, the responsibility of women for this original sin is often emphasized by giving a female head to the serpent who tempts Eve to disobey God. The story underlined the belief that women were inferior to men and that they were morally weaker and likely to tempt men into sin. Throughout the Middle Ages, the place of women in society was often dictated by biblical texts. The writings of the Apostle Paul, in particular, emphasized men's authority over women, forbidding women from teaching and instructing them to remain silent. However, the Virgin Mary was a contrast to this negative image as the mother of Christ she was the channel through which Christians might be saved. She was sometimes described as the second Eve, as she was seen to have made up for Eve's sins. Throughout the Middle Ages, Mary was seen as the most powerful of all saints, as well as a strong, if paradoxical, model of chastity and motherhood. There were some women who exercised power, providing a challenge to the stereotypical image of medieval women as oppressed and subservient. In the church, women could hold positions of great responsibility as abbesses of convents. In some instances, such as monasteries that housed communities of men and women, the abbess had seniority over monks. Outside monastic walls, women could wield political power, especially as queens and regents who exercised royal authority on behalf of absent husbands and underage sons. A number of powerful queens can be noted in English history, of whom one of the most remarkable was Queen Isabella from 1295 to 1358. Who, in collaboration with her lover, Sir Robert Mortimer, brought about the end of the reign of her husband, Edward II, reigned from 1284 to 1327. The marriages of young aristocratic women were usually arranged by their families, but here it is worth noting that their husbands too had little choice in their partners. Once widowed, such women had legal independence and, in many instances, autonomy over considerable financial resources. The two main alternatives for a medieval woman were to marry or to take the veil and become a nun. Almost all female orders required women to live behind the walls of a monastery or within an individual cell, living a life of contemplation, prayer, and work. Though the appeal of this way of life might be difficult to grasp today, for a medieval woman, one of its attractions must have been freedom from the dangers of childbearing. Most women, however, were married, usually as teenagers. Afterwards, they were responsible for managing the household, whether this was a great castle or a small peasant hovel. Wealthy women had servants who assisted them with cooking, cleaning, and childcare, and so were left time to engage in other pursuits. Popular diversions for aristocratic women included religious activities, hunting, dancing, and playing games. Sometimes they engaged in study and wrote books, but these are exceptions. Pregnancy and childbirth were risky in the Middle Ages. Complications that would today be considered relatively minor, such as the breech presentation of the baby, could be fatal for mother and child. The caesarean section, known since antiquity, was normally only performed if the mother was dead or dying, as it was inevitably fatal for her. Laboring women were attended by midwives whose understanding of childbirth was for the most part attained through practical experience rather than formal training, though by the latter Middle Ages the profession began to be formally recognized. Midwives were responsible for performing emergency baptisms in instances where the infant's life was in danger, as well as caring for the mothers. Now we are going to discuss about the property right of women in medieval Europe. The first group of peasant women consisted of free landholders. Early records such as the Exon Domesday and Little Domesday attested that among English landowners 10 to 14% noble and non-noble free tenants were women, and Wendy Davis found records which showed that in 54% of property transactions women could act independently or jointly with their husbands and sons. Still, only after the 13th century are there records which better showed free female peasants' right to land. In addition, English manorial court rolls recorded many activities carried out by free peasants such as selling and inheriting lands, paying rents, settling upon debts and credits, brewing and selling ale, and if unfree, rendering labor services to lords. Pre-peasant women, unlike their male counterparts, could not become officers such as manorial jurors, constables, and revees. The second category of medieval European workers was serf. Conditions of serfdom applied to both genders. Serfs did not enjoy property rights as did free tenants. Serfs were restricted from leaving their lords' lands at will and were forbidden to dispose of their assigned holdings. Both male and female serfs had to labor as part of their services to their lords, and their required activities might be even specifically gendered by the lords. A serf woman would pass her serfdom status to her children. In contrast, children would inherit gentry status from their father. When female serfs got married, they had to pay fines to their lords. The first fine upon a female serf getting married was known as marchet, to be paid by her father to their lord. The rationale was that the lord had lost a worker and her children. The second fine is the leerweit, to be paid by a male or female serf who had committed sexual acts forbidden by the church, for fear that the fornicating serf might have her marriage value lessened, and thus the lord might not get the marchet. Land ownership involved various inheritance patterns according to the potential heir's gender across the landscape of medieval Western Europe. Primogeniture prevailed in England, Normandy, and the Basque region. In the Basque region, the eldest child, regardless of sex, inherited all lands. In Normandy, only sons could inherit lands. In England, the eldest son usually inherited all properties, but sometimes sons inherited jointly. Daughters would inherit only if there were no sons. In Scandinavia, sons received twice as much as daughters' inheritance, yet siblings of the same sex received equal shares. In northern France, Brittany, and the Holy Roman Empire, sons and daughters enjoyed partible inheritance. Each child would receive an equal share regardless of sex. Female landowners, single or married, could grant or sell land as they deemed fit. Women managed the estates when their husbands left for war, political affairs, and pilgrimages. Nevertheless, as time passed, women were increasingly given as dowries movable properties such as gold and cash instead of land. Even though up the year 1000 female land ownership had been increasing, afterwards female land ownership began to decline. Commercialization also contributed to the decline of female land ownership, as more women left the countryside to work for wages as servants or day laborers. Medieval widows independently managed and cultivated their deceased husbands' lands. Overall, widows were preferred over children to inherit lands. Indeed, English widows would receive one-third of the couple's shared properties, but in Normandy, widows could not inherit. Yet, however powerful some women were in the Middle Ages, it is important to remember that the overwhelming majority were not. Most women, even those in privileged circumstances, had little control over the direction their lives took. So this is the end of our today's discussion. Subscribe our channel for regular notification and like our videos and comment. Listen to our podcast episodes. Follow our official Facebook page, Twitter handle and Instagram. For any query, feel free to mail us. For details, see the description.